I always run my own sound, so if at any point you can't hear me, I'm sorry. Let's do discrete hand motions, and I'll try and fix it. All right, cool. So I'm not really used to doing things early in the morning, which you may have guessed. With me being a musician and working in theater, we pretty much start at noon at the earliest. So I'm also not used to just talking about music, because when I'm used to being given a chunk of time, I just get to figure out how long my songs are and write a set list. So to make me a little bit more comfortable and to show you guys a little bit about what I do when I play shows, I brought a mini version. I thought I'd start out with a song and then talk for a little bit. I utilize a loop pedal when I play, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, but I always prefer running little tiny battery-powered cheap Casios through it, so it might sound a little different than you're used to. So yeah, I'll get started with that, and then excited to talk about sound with you this morning. Just how I got here. The story takes its twists and turns, but somehow I, buried in caution, found more than I could ever earn. I felt you growing in my love stomach. I felt you kick me while I slept. I felt you changing the world around me. I felt you simplify my best. Oh, this love, it changed my name. Oh, this love, it made me stay. Scarier than anything, but filling me up day by day. Bring me courage, always be strong, because you give me strength. And if you learn one thing, let it be that lightness can come out from any dark place. Oh, this love, it changed my name. Oh, this love, it made me stay. Scarier than anything, but fill So that song is called Heartbeat Part 2, and I'm going to talk about that later on in the story. But I wrote it a few years ago, and it was sort of a turning point for me, and that's a story that I want to talk about. Not so much literal sound, but the power of figuring out your sound and how to tell your story. And I've been playing shows in Grand Rapids for about 11 years. I've been writing music a lot longer than that, but that was the point that I figured out how to do it live and get over stage fright and how to book a show and all those good things. Initially, when I started writing music, it was really private. I had like a neon pink room in my mom's basement with a bunch of random instruments I'd collected and like a Best Buy copy of this program Cakewalk, and started figuring out how to write and record and play all of my own instruments and layer it, and started doing it. I had a couple teachers that would let me do songs instead of papers in school, like as book reports. So that was encouraging to me, because instead of writing a paper, I just got to play music and turn that in. But it wasn't anything that I really thought about putting out in the world, and especially not performing live. So I think I was about 17, and I had an album worth of songs that I think I had put on MySpace and sent to my friends in email. And someone in Detroit offered to record the album for me. So I went out there during the summer before my senior year of high school, and started recording this album. And then when I got back, I had to go back to high school, so I didn't have a lot of time to work on finishing the album, and decided I should try and play a show. So I booked my first show at the Hungry Heart Cafe, if any of you guys have ever been there. It's been gone for a long time. And practiced until I lost my voice because I was terrified, and played the show and got absolutely hooked on it. Started playing shows all the time. I was sort of like the resident opening act at the DAC for like 6 years. But what I realized was that while writing music was always a really cathartic thing for me, there's a whole different level at the point when you're inviting people to interact with it live. And the connection that I found in that and the people that I met through it were the reason that I became so addicted to it. So I kept playing shows, and I released a full-length album in 2008. That were a lot of older things that I'd written in high school. And, you know, I toured around with that for a while, did a couple of EPs, and then, so I grew up in Hudsonville, which is a really wonderful little suburb of here, very conservative, and always felt a little bit suffocating for me to be there. But when I went off to college in Kalamazoo, which is so close, it felt like a different world, and found all of these musicians that were playing crazy house shows and doing a really, really good job of telling their stories honestly. So I went off to school, was back on break, I think for Christmas one year, and there's a Christian thrift store called Love Inc. And I found this keyboard right here. This is like the prettiest little Casio. This little one has a built-in cassette deck, so you can play along to all your favorite tapes from childhood. I found that keyboard at Love Inc. It was $10, I remember, and everything was on sale. Everything was 33% off, so it rang up as $6.66, and I got out of there as fast as I could. Felt like it was kind of fate. But I also, when I was away at school, had recently come out to myself, come out of the closet. Hadn't quite come out to my family yet, and proceeded to write basically an entire album of lesbian love songs on this Casio right here. So it was very important to me, and I think that the price carries on in the story quite well. So at that point, the personal connection that I had through music shifted a lot, because I had been telling my story to people for years and had been so empowered by feeling less lonely when people related to it. And then suddenly I had the choice. Still going to be writing love songs and heartbreak songs and songs about how much college is exhausting and all of these things that are so relatable, but do I change the pronouns in them now? Is that something that I want to be honest about? Or is that something that I want to just leave kind of open-ended so that more people can relate? I was writing a lot of songs with just you in it, and I still do, but everybody can relate to it if you say you. So when I was writing that album, which is called Mine, on mostly this keyboard in my dorm, it was a scary moment for me, just because I felt like I had to choose. I had to choose whether I wanted to go in the way of Indigo Girls or like keep playing DAC shows, and I didn't want to choose my audience. So I decided, like in a couple of the songs, I would be pretty explicit. Not in that way, but like, sheep. And what I found as I started playing those songs live and then releasing the album was that it didn't matter to people at all. Like, if you're telling a story about your first love, they don't care the gender of the person that you're talking about, right? They're in it for the feeling and the atmosphere that you're building in the song. Which is, I think, one of the most important things that I learned from it was that when you're writing a song, you have the power to make your story for like 2.5 minutes, everybody's story. And it still won't be completely, but there's going to be a part of it that they hang on to. So I finished that album and I released it, and the funny thing about recording music is that the time frame between writing the songs and the record actually coming out can take a long time. So that was about 1.5 years for me. And in the midst of that 1.5 years of writing the last song and then actually releasing the album, some very interesting things happened in my life. Namely, I became a parent. And I hadn't written anything about that yet. So I had this album of new songs that a lot of people hadn't heard, that I was playing shows about. But it was weird because I was talking like very explicitly about a period years ago. The other thing about being a musician who's also a parent is that it's really hard to be loud when you have a baby that you want to be sleeping. It's also hard to find free time that you don't want to use for sleeping or seeing your friends or doing the dishes. But the third and biggest challenge for me in writing music as a parent was an even greater fear of disconnecting, of when I tell my story, of it being disconnected from the people that I'm telling it to. The interesting thing about my journey to parenthood is that I did not carry my child. I am the non-biological second mother of a now 6-year-old little kid. So I didn't know how to explain the most important part of my life to people who, odds are, probably wouldn't really get it. And so I didn't write music for a long time. I jumped into parenting. I started putting my creative energy into other projects like Lady Fest and Girls Rock, like Molly mentioned. And there was no loss there. I mean, those are some of the most wonderful things that I've ever done. Lady Fest, if you're not familiar, is an event that happens all around the world in different ways, different cities. But it's about empowering women through concerts and workshops and just building community and then donating all the proceeds to a nonprofit. So we organized 5 of those, 5 years of Lady Fest Grand Rapids. The 6th one is happening this March. And it felt like, well, if I can't figure out how to write my own story anymore, at least then we get to put other women's stories on this platform. And similarly with Girls Rock Grand Rapids, if I just don't have the time or the creativity anymore, if I'm completely drained, at least I can teach 8 to 16-year-old girls how to play the keyboard and let them tell their own stories. And so in a way, it felt a little bit like disappearing, and in another way, it felt a lot like just going undercover, right? Like now I'm just going to work for other people, and I want them to be able to tell their story. But it still was really uncomfortable for me, because I had met most of the people that I care about very deeply in the city through playing music. And I could still keep in touch with them, but there was a vital part of my life that had changed. So I have a good friend who is writing a novel, and a few years ago saw that I was really struggling with music and said, hey, we have a condo on the beach for the weekend or something. We're all going to go on a little writer's retreat. So I pack up basically like these Casios in an overnight bag, and we go out. I think it was in Muskegon, and everybody was working on their own projects, and we would just sort of come back together for meals. And I ended up writing Heartbeat Part 2, which is the song I just played, which was, for me, a really important step in telling and in continuing to tell my story. I think for me, it sort of felt like when you have like a best friend that you see every day, and then you don't talk to them for 4 years, and then you call them back and you're like, we can still talk, like you know all the old stories, but like I have to fill you in on all of these huge things that have happened since we talked. Except for me, it's like this weird relationship I have with the audience, and I feel like people are like, where'd Jes go? What's she been doing? And I don't think anybody was actually saying that, and because they can just go back and listen to the old records again. But for me, it was just like, I've disappeared from the people that I really care about. And so when I finally wrote that song, which, talks about sleeping next to the woman you love while the baby kicks in her side of her stomach. Like, there's not a lot of dancing around the topic in that song. I felt like it was my step in figuring out how to come back to the story. And I think that's still a fear that I have as it goes on. But what I learned is that the beginning of me playing shows was very much about feeling like I had a community, because coming from Hudsonville and Hudsonville High School, I struggled to feel like there were like-minded people in this area. And so telling those simple, relatable stories was a really good way for me to find those people and to be like, oh, you've experienced that too, we are not alone. And then I feel like as it progresses, I'm really starting to realize the power in telling stories that like maybe only you can tell. I think through Ladyfest and through Girls Rock, that idea really got rooted in my brain, where we're all coming together over something that we have in common, gender, and then the desire to play music or to share what we do. And that space was so safe for so many people because of that one thing that they had in common. But if you actually took the time to talk to everybody that was involved in those events, everybody's coming from vastly different places across the board. And those events are specific to their intention of not erasing our differences, right? It's about finding a safe space to talk about our differences and to share our unique stories. And in some ways then just to find community, but in other ways to find that it's educational for everyone. It's encouraging for everyone to realize the depth of the world and the people that are around us. So I'm not gonna say this next album is gonna educate everybody about non-biological parenting, because that's a hardy claim. But for me, it was crucial to understand that while it can be scary to tell a story that nobody else might share, if you want to feel empowered by your story, which is going to be your story whether you talk about it or not, you have to share it in some way, whether it's a call to an old best friend, or whether it's writing music about it, or whether it's creating art in any form. Because the more that we exist in a world where everybody has their same story, I mean, which is impossible, but we're missing out on all of the colors and the beauty of this place. I remember a few years ago, right before Lady Fest time, there's a women's radio show in Kalamazoo on a radio station called Wider, and they wanted to come up and interview me about Lady Fest. So one of the hosts came up with her little digital recorder and came over to my house, and we were sitting and talking about why we have Lady Fest. And she was like, but I need some music filler for this piece. Like, it's just, we don't want it to be talking for 10 minutes. So she asked me if I would play a couple songs that she could work into the interview. And I wasn't prepared for it, so I was kind of digging around, see what keyboards I had there and what I could play. And she asked me, she said, would you play Heartbeat Part 2? Which was really weird because there was like a demo online of it somewhere, but it hadn't been officially released. And I don't know, that was always a song that I felt was just for me. She said that the manager of the radio station that she was there for was a non-biological second parent to her child and had never heard a song about it before, and it would really mean a lot to her if I would play that in this interview. And for me, that was this moment of realizing how important it is. Because you're either going to teach people about a world that they should understand exists out there outside of their own, or you're going to reach the one or two people that have never heard anybody talking about their story. So whatever way you can find to be brave with it is going to make a difference.